Good afternoon, I'm Giovanni Dennis with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're joining us online at onespotmedia.com. Children's advocate Diahann Gordon-Harrison is strongly condemning two recent reports of Buggery in St. Ann. The suspects in both cases are now in police custody. In the first case, a 13-year-old girl was assaulted by 5 men on April 26, but the police were informed of the incident on Friday. The girl was on her way to a shop when she was reportedly forced into an unfinished building and buggered. In the other case, a toddler went across to the next-door home of a 20-year-old man who is well known to his family. According to the police, the man took the child to a nearby animal pen where he was sexually molested. The matter was reported to the Ocherius police, who launched an investigation and the man taken into custody. The children's advocate is hoping that swift justice will be brought against the perpetrators.
To send a message that violence against children in whatever form is something that we condemn as a society and that will be appropriately punished once there is the evidence to support a conviction.
The children's advocate is also raising concern about the high number of abuse meted out to children since the start of the year. The figures were released by head of the Center for Investigation of Sexual Offences and Child Abuse, CISOCA, SSP Charmaine Shand.
For island-wide cases, we have seen 551 reports to include both sexual assault and physical assault on children.
The numbers are staggering, and especially when you put it in the context that we do still surmise and have reason to believe that we are still seeing underreports because, of course, children have not been able to have access as readily to like guidance counselors and so on because of the remote schooling that we have had to resort to due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
SSP Shand says she's concerned as cases are underreported due to online schooling because of COVID-19.
When I looked at my report for last week, we arrested and charged 7 persons for failing to report to the Office of the Children's Registry a case of child abuse. So we are concerned, and because we have lost those 2 major set of persons that usually make referrals to CISOCA, children are now at home and they need avenues for reporting themselves. So what we will have to do is to try and empower and encourage children to report.
17 persons were yesterday arrested and charged under the Disaster Risk Management Act after a police patrol team swooped down on beach goers at Laughing Waters near Ocherius, St. Ann. Commanding officer for the St. Ann Division, Superintendent Dwight Powell, says around 4 p.m. the officers were patrolling the north coast shoreline when the group of persons along with 5 children were spotted.
They were found in the water at Laughing Water in breach of the restriction that has been announced as it relates to the beaches. So they have been taken into custody. We have since charged the 17 adults. The children were warned and released to their parents. We are taking the opportunity to advise the persons who are using the beaches in St. Ann in breach of the Disaster Risk Management Act. So this is from the practice.
Superintendent Powell said most of the regulated beaches in the parish are compliant, but he warns if persons continue to flout the law and attend these venues, they will be arrested and charged.
Is the unregulated beaches. Those beaches that are operated by persons, most of those persons are compliant. And we speak about Flavors Beach in Runaway Bay. We speak about a few down in Discovery, where we define that those beaches are operated by individual entities. Those beaches are normally in compliance. If they continue to float the law, they will be prosecuted. We will ensure that they are prosecuted. We will bring them to books, to account. So I would advise them to stay home, leave the beaches alone until whatever the government will do as it relates to whether the beaches will be reopened.
The number of COVID-19 deaths is nearing 800. 6 deaths were recorded Sunday, bringing the death toll to 790. 172 new cases of COVID-19 were confirmed across the island on Sunday. This pushes the total confirmed cases to 46,039. The positivity rate is now 21.2%. Meanwhile, 213 persons remain in hospital. 24 are critically ill. There are currently 23,420 active cases. The Holness administration may be forced to revisit wage talks as more public sector bodies have rejected the 2.5% proposed by the government. One group has since labeled the wage increase as an insult. Sandy Williams reports.
Another public sector group has rejected the government's wage offer, with the Nurses Association of Jamaica, NAJ, calling it an insult. The government has presented a 2.5% non-negotiable wage increase for the current financial year. NAJ President Patsy Edwards-Henry says nurses could not realistically accept the offer.
Well, the NAJ has penned a response already. The response has not gone out yet, but in essence, the response is rejecting the offer. As nurses in a climate like this, it is not realistic for us to accept 2.5%.
Mrs. Edwards-Henry says the NAJ will be seeking more information on the effect of the increased pension payments.
We will be meeting on Wednesday. We're in dialogue with somebody to come and educate us on to exactly how the NIS increase will impact our members from the different levels. So that's where we are, but in essence, we cannot accept a 2.5% increase. To us, we think it's an insult to the nurses at this point in the history of Jamaica.
And it appears the government could also meet resistance from the police. Chairman of the Police Federation, Corporal Rohan James, says the organization's Central Executive Committee will meet today to consider the offer.
We certainly will not be able to, at this time, accept, because in good faith, we would have acceded to a 4-year request, and in acceding to that 4-year request, we gave the government sufficient time to conduct its compensation review. We expected that the government would reciprocate in good faith and engage us in a civil dialogue that we can arrive at an amicable solution.
Meanwhile, the Jamaica Teachers Association says the 2.5% wage offer is unacceptable. It is planning to pursue negotiations on the claim it submitted to the Finance Ministry last December.
Based on what we are experiencing now with rising inflation levels hovering above 5%, increase in NIS and pension, we are not able to countenance any movement in salaries and working conditions of our teachers that will make us worse off.
Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
And we now take a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back. We're continuing the news. Despite the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, students sitting the primary exit profile exams will have to do so in a classroom setting. Education Minister Favour Williams made the disclosure during a recent education town hall. But this depends on the impact of the virus across the island at the stipulated examination dates. O'Shane Masters reports.
The Education Ministry has disclosed that no arrangement has been made for this year's primary exit profile PEP exams to be conducted online as the country continues to grapple with the COVID-19 pandemic. Education Minister Favour Williams says students will have to attend school to sit the exam.
Again, it's all going to depend on how the COVID progresses, how this health pandemic progresses here in Jamaica. As I said earlier on, we're working closely with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, even though we have set dates. But again, this is a health situation that we are in, and we have to abide by those decisions from our health professionals.
The ministry last week announced new dates for the 2021 PEP exams. June 15 and 16 have been selected for grade 5 students, and June 29 and 30 for those in grade 4. Additionally, the ability test for grade 6 students, which was originally slated for February 23 and postponed to March 23, will now take place on May 26. However, there will be no performance task or curriculum-based tests for grade 6 students. Acting Chief Education Officer Dr. Kassan Troop has assured parents that despite the challenges caused by the pandemic, there is still a transparent process for the placement of PEP students.
We are going through the process with our psychometricians to make sure that the weighting is fair to all our students, and I'm reassuring my parents again that you need not worry. We have the experience in this process. We did it last year, and all our students were successfully placed. And so we're asking you to trust us to just complete the activity on May 26th, and then we will do further work with our psychometrician to come up with the best approach to place our boys and girls. So we are asking you for some more time.
The Education Ministry says the results of the PEP exams should be available by the last week of June. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
The Senate on Friday approved amendments to the Justice of the Peace Act, which will see JPs commissioned in Kingston or St. Andrew being allowed to operate in both parishes. The debate also opened the door for questions and suggestions relating to the office. Herman Green reports.
The bill to amend the Justices of the Peace Act was tabled by Senator Matthew Samuda. Currently, the Act says the parish in which a Justice of the Peace is appointed must be the parish in which he or she resides or works. As such, appointments in St. Andrew do not apply to Kingston, and vice versa.
This bill seeks to remedy the current language of Section 8.1 of the Justices of the Peace Act to ensure a fluidity and ease of access for persons to apply and become Justices of the Peace once they reside and have their principal place of work in either the parish of Kingston or St. Andrew.
However, while supporting the bill, opposition senators had suggestions for improving the skills of appointees and putting the office to greater use.
And right now, for example, I'm hearing the government speak of a third COVID wave. And we are of the view that JPs can be drafted as part of any public education that may take place in the prevention of a third COVID wave.
I do not think, Mr. President, that training which they experience is deep enough and long enough and consistent enough for the work that they do. And I would like to see that strengthened. I would like them to be made more familiar with the legislation and more familiar with their roles.
Another area in which the JPs could help, since they're so close, is this battle we have, Senator Hill, against violence against women. We could ask the JPs to play a role in talking to the males and also talking to the females. One thing the last week has taught me, for example, is that the JPs may play a role as counselor. For example, Senator Langmore.
The bill was passed with no amendments.
The Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee, CMOC, says 2 of the 4 key deliverables within the National Crime Consensus Agreement have been red-flagged. Chairman of CMOC, Lloyd Distant Jr., says the Public Bodies Management Accountability Act governing the nomination, selection and appointment of board members has not been realized.
Last year it had been piloted through the lower house. It went to the upper house, the Senate, and was sent back for changes. Now it's been 9 months, in fact it's just over 9 months, in fact, that it has been sent back to the House and it hasn't gone through. The deliverable, they had committed to getting it through by December, and as of this point in time, it still hasn't gone through and we still have not received an update as to when to expect it to come through.
Speaking this morning on TVJ Smile Jamaica, Mr. Distant said the other unachieved target is the transformation of the Jamaica Constabulary Force.
We need to have about 18,000, optimally 18,000 members in the force. The numbers say that we can work with 14,000, so 14,000 would be good enough. Right now we're at about 11,700. Last year we should have added 1,000 new people to the force. We only added 700. So as much as we are moving in the right direction, we're still well off target to achieve 14,000 by 2023.
Mr. Distant reassured the country that several areas of the consensus agreement are progressing. Among those are the approval of outstanding MOCA regulations and the strengthening of the inspectorate. CMOC was established last August with a mandate to set goals aimed at mitigating crime and report to the public. The areas of focus for the committee include dismantling and eliminating criminal gangs and normalizing reintegrating troubled communities. The Jamaica Accountability Meter portal, JAMP, is supporting the private members' bill tabled in Parliament by opposition leader Mark Golding. The bill will allow for the impeachment of senators and members of Parliament who are in breach of the law. Head of JAMP, Jeanette Calder, is urging the government to support the bill.
Any egregious conduct or other misbehavior unbefitting of the holder of the office of senator or member of parliament. And it does go on, which is so serious in nature as to 1, render the holder of the office unfit to continue to hold that office, or brings the office held by the person into disrepute.
Ms. Calder added that it's been 10 years since the constitutional amendment impeachment bill was tabled by former Prime Minister Bruce Golding in 2011. She is calling on the Parliament to move swiftly in ensuring the bill is passed in this legislative year.
Well, it has been almost 2,000 days, not 100 days, since that promise was made. And coming out of the George Wright scenario, we are recognizing that we are in need of this impeachment bill after 28 years of waiting. We would like to see the Parliament, as said in JAMP's call, not just start it, but make sure that it is passed within this legislative year.
And it's now time for the Business Minute. Here's Cody Barrett.
In the latest in the financial world, the NCB Financial Group is to pay out over $1.2 billion to shareholders this month as it resumes dividend payments. The dividend payments, which is to be made by May 31, comes even as the regional financial conglomerate reports its net profit fell 31% to $9.2 billion in the 6 months October to March. In the meantime, CEO of NCB Capital Markets Stephen Gooden says he's hoping to get a positive response this year on its application for a brokerage license to operate in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, so I would say we are fairly advanced in the regulatory approval process, and I expect us to be in receipt of the license prior to the end of the financial year.
Phosphorus Company reports its revenues and profits grew impressively in the 3 months January to March. The electrical manufacturing and distributing entity says profit in the quarter was 8 times the level it was last year at $38 million. This from sales which topped $549 million. Goodyear is trying to locate shareholders to make a final payment to them as it seeks to complete its winding up in Jamaica. The tire company, which once operated out of St. Thomas, advises that it is to make a final payment of 63 cents per share, but cannot locate some of its previous shareholders to complete the transaction. Those who were on record as owning the company's shares as at December 19, 2008, should make contact with the Jamaica Central Securities Depository to make arrangements for the payments, which will be made starting May 21, subject to a 4% transfer tax. Cody Barrett, TVJ News.
And here's a look at what's coming up in this evening's edition of A Ray of Hope with Ken Morgan.
Coming up in this evening's edition of A Ray of Hope.
People write to get rid of pent-up emotions, but I usually draw. I must say I really enjoy painting. Like, it takes you to another world, you know?
That's A Ray of Hope, this evening during Primetime News.
A Ray of Hope, brought to you by...
At Courts, we've got more ways for you to shop and pay. Shopping just got easier, only at Courts. Conditions apply.
And to news overseas, Israel's parliament will hold a memorial Monday for the 45 victims of Friday's stampede at Mount Meron, as questions and criticisms grow over the management of the mountaintop site. More from the CNN.
A day of national mourning across Israel, flags flying at half-mast here at the Knesset or Parliament, and also on other public buildings, Israeli army bases and Israeli missions around the world. 45 people were killed in the stampede that took place in northern Israel in the early hours of Friday morning. All of those bodies have now been identified and funerals have begun. According to someone with familiarity with the list of fatalities, it's expected that at least 5 of them were US citizens. Around a dozen people remain ill in hospital, 2 of them seriously. And amid the sadness and sorrow, questions are being asked as to how this could have happened in the first place and who was responsible. The police has launched an internal inquiry. The Attorney General has launched an inquiry looking into possible criminal negligence on the part of the police. And reports have emerged of warnings that went unheeded in previous years. Indeed, the former head of the regional council that includes Mount Meron, where the disaster happened, says that it was a ticking time bomb and that on one occasion he even issued a warrant to have it shut down, but that because of political pressure, that warrant could not be enforced. The Public Security Minister, Amir Ohana, an ally of Prime Minister Netanyahu, he says that he takes responsibility but doesn't accept the blame, saying that this could have happened in any of previous years when there were many, many more thousands of people attending this event, and calls now for a full state inquiry to understand all the facts that led up to and included this event and the deaths of those 45 people.
To news and sports, Jamaica's men's sprint relay team remained as one of the 16 qualifiers for this summer's Olympic Games after no team at the World Relays was able to run faster than the Jamaicans' semi-final time from the Doha World Championships. South Africa won the men's 4x100-meter final in Poland on Sunday in a time of 38.71 seconds, slower than Jamaica's 38.15 from Doha. The South Africans won ahead of Italy 39.21 and Japan 39.42. Brazil and Ghana were disqualified after initially placing second and third. Jamaica's men's sprint relay team, who are yet to register a time since their semi-final exit at the Doha World Championships, remain outside the 6 automatic qualifiers for the Olympic Games. They have until June 29 to register another qualifying time. Jamaica had opted out of the World Relays belatedly due to travel restrictions associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.